Welcome back to the weekly news roundup and a return of the Linux news. We'd suspended it for a period of time due to lower power. In the dead of the winter, we don't draw as much power off of the sun in this mobile office of mine, and had to cut some things back. And, over the Christmas vacation, there really was not a lot of Linuxy news. But we are back with Linux news. I think we have 4 or 5 stories. Looks like we have 5 stories in Linux news today. So we'll go ahead and chat about these guys. Of course, you can catch the show live at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday nights. So with this, the Raspberry Pi just got a new version. This is the 16 gigabyte variant is here. There's a special RAM chip being created in order to do this, and yes, it does still function well. There's no hint on the Raspberry Pi 500 having a 16 gig option yet. Maybe that'll come down, but we will now have the ability to get a Raspberry Pi 5 with 16 gigs of RAM. I gotta say, my Raspberry Pi 5 with 8 gigs of RAM runs like a regular computer for the type of work I use it with. If I just plugged you down in front of it and didn't tell you what it was, you would not even know it's a little single board computer. But they are available now, $120 for those interested in such devices. And next up, Fish has gotten rusty. So there's been, it actually started as just what many people thought was just a troll pull request saying rewrite it in Rust back in 2023. Well, Fish 4.0 is out and it is entirely made in Rust. They traded 57 lines of C++ code for 57,000 lines of code. I don't know if I said 1,000 there. With 75,000 lines of Rust code. And it is entirely rewritten. So the end up consequence of this, the performance is a lot better. So it has a higher amount of memory use at its floor. So it's running 8 megabytes at its floor instead of 7. But the efficiency, they said, is significantly better, meaning it has a much higher or a much lower, ceiling. And so it will hopefully allow it to run a lot better. They did talk about how they went about doing this, going into the individual components. Then they used Auto CXX to allow them to rebuild some of the Rust components. And then they ended up just pushing everything out to have the entire plugin ultimately made in Rust. So for those that are interested in Rust and or interested in the Fish shell, this is of course one of the applications you can use for your shell emulator. Sorry about that. So you can go ahead and look into that. A warning for anybody running Ubuntu Studio. If you're still on 2204 and you're looking to go to 2404, serious conflict, don't try it. Okay, there is a big problem. So there's a couple major changes in this. One of those is that it goes from XFCE to KDE as default. The other thing is a switch between Pulse Audio and Pipewire. The thing, though, is that like Wayland, Pipewire is getting better and better and better, but there's still a few niche places it doesn't seem to work as well, and that would appear to be some of the seriously advanced audio input things you need. So Ubuntu Studio still has it still has the ability to use both, but when you run an upgrade path, the upgrader wants to strip everything Pulse Audio out, replace it with Pipewire, but it fails to fix everything. The updater gets completely confused and the whole thing crashes down, resulting in a corrupted system. So you don't want to do that. And a lot of this just had to do with the switch between Pipewire and Pulse Audio. And it's not just the reason your typical Linux distribution doesn't have a problem with this is because the typical distribution does not have the massive amount of audio software that's not specifically written to work with Pipewire yet. And so that really is the issue. Now, if you were to install a fresh version, everything still works. A lot of this is because even in 2404, Ubuntu Studio is still using Pulse Audio with an optional Wayland, but when you're doing the upgrade, it tries to strip the Pulse Audio in replace of Pipewire. Excuse me, I said Wayland earlier. I should have said Pipewire. My apologies. So what we basically what they're trying to do is fix and resolve this. Their current status is it's going to break your system. So if you do want that Ubuntu Studio 2404, you're going to need to just build the system fresh. Just install it fresh, make a copy of your data, install the system fresh, and restore all of your data, which, might be a good option anyway from time to time. And in Linux gaming news, Arch-based distributions are now dominating the Linux game scene. We had Endeavour OS join the top 5, I think it's top 6 list of Linux distributions being used for gaming, which edged out Debian 12, which used to hold the 6th place position. Of course, Endeavour OS is also based on Arch. So when you're looking at the specific operating systems utilizing Steam, and Linux is still only at about I can't even read this super well. Let's see if I can get this bigger. It's 2.29% is Linux. The top is 0.2 of that is Arch Linux, just itself. And then number 2 position is Ubuntu 2404.1 LTS at 0.1. Tied with that is Linux Mint 22.0, also at 0.1. And then falling below that is Ubuntu Core running 0.08, Manjaro Linux 0.06, and for the first time we see Endeavour OS show up at 0.06 as well. Endeavour OS is, of course, also built on Arch. So you have Arch, you have Manjaro, and you have Endeavour, all based on Arch. You have Ubuntu, Linux Mint, and Ubuntu Core, of course, all based on Ubuntu. But it would appear that the Arch is definitely the majority of what is running Steam. So this is why many people are saying, if you're looking at running gaming, Arch might be the way to go. However, Dan, a supporter of the show and often on Thursday nights, he still runs Debian, and he actually says Debian runs just fine for games. The point being is that games run fine on Linux. As long as you're not trying to play the latest and greatest AAA titles, you're going to have really good luck with gaming on Linux. You might just have to look into the Steam DB, the Proton DB to look up the games. And with those, you can get the direct settings that people are using. So these are actually really good options. And on to our final story from today from Ars Technica, written by Kevin Purdy. This is the Linux Foundation bands together the Chromium browser makers in a neutral space. Of course, who are these guys? This is a who's who of people I don't trust. I don't know. Google, Meta, Microsoft, and Opera. Okay, those are the 4 big players here in the Chromium development. Of course, the Chromium is the open source software package that eventually becomes Google Chrome and Brave, and of course Chromium, ungoogled Chromium, Vivaldi, Opera, and pretty much name any other web browser that's not Firefox, LibreWolf, Tails, or Tor or Mullvad, and probably it's all based on Chromium as well. So that is where we are at. They are combining all of their resources. Now, I thought this was interesting because this basically allows the groups to work in a more collaborative method rather than each coming with their own individual offerings, which is, in my opinion, this is actually a good approach because it staves off some of the issue. If you remember the antitrust case with Google, one of the things they were proposing is force Google to sell Chrome. Well, the problem isn't Chrome. The problem might be that Google would have the main control over Chromium. Now, as of right now, the repositories aren't moving, but they're creating a collaborative space being spearheaded by the Linux Foundation in order to make the collaboration project on Chromium itself good. Now, if you think that this is like, great, it doesn't, Google's not the only one in charge over here anymore. Maybe we'll get our Manifest V2 back. Don't even think about it because who else likes ads more than Google? Well, Meta and Microsoft. Opera's just over there being, hey, we're just representing the CPP, you have 3 big companies that all love ads and data collection. Don't plan on them bringing back that Manifest V2. I will note, though, that Brave, number 1, the Brave built-in blocker does not rely on manifest at all, so that is unimpacted, but they are also maintaining manifest v2 for as long as conceivably possible. The same has been said about Vivaldi as well. I don't know the status on Opera or Edge. But that is what is going on in the Linux news. If you want to help support the channel, we do have a Patreon page, patreon.com/TOMM. If you want to jump on, that'll support all my channels. And if you are unfamiliar with the old Writing Done Right channel, we have brought that back. We will be releasing one video per week, typically Saturday mornings. So that channel is dedicated to using free and open source software to do writing and publishing. So if you are interested in writing a book and want to learn some of the insides of the writing stuff, Writing Done Right is an excellent channel available on YouTube, Odyssey, and Rumble. Of course, Patreon will help support that Linux and my Christian work as well. You can jump on over there, and as an update to our short story series, we finished the short story. The audio tracks are laid down. Half of those are edited. I plan on getting the other half done this weekend, so that short story should hit on Monday is what our target date is. So our next short story, which will be available over on Patreon, patreon.com/TOMM.